Hello, my name's Dr. Ellie Atkins. I'm a clinical psychologist working at St George's Hospital in London, and I've written a quick guide to managing stress and anxiety around coronavirus. Excuse me, I've written a longer version of this presentation, and when I recorded it, it took over an hour. So this is your quick guide. If you haven't got much time, then just look at this. I am going to rattle through it quite fast, but the joy of this kind of media is that you can just pause it if you want to look at something for longer, or you can go back and listen. You'll notice that I do talk quite fast, and there's some slides that I'll just leave you to read in your own time. So I'm a clinical health psychologist. I work in London, and my job is to help people around their health difficulties and their worries that they might have about that. And now here we are in a situation where everybody's really worried about health. And I want to say, I can't take away the difficulties that you're going through, but I can walk alongside you. I don't know exactly what your situation is, and it might be different to the situation that I find myself in. But I want to say that it doesn't mean that you're alone in this, that we can walk together, whatever our circumstances. And I hope that this might help you to understand maybe some of the things that you're feeling around this. I'm starting with key messages because when we're really stressed, our brain doesn't process very well and it's hard to take in all the information. So you don't have to pay attention to any of the rest of this presentation if you just listen to these two key messages. My first one is, it's okay not to be okay. We're in an absolutely unprecedented situation, and it's really normal to feel anxious or angry or distressed about what's happening. And my second message is, we will get through this. There are strategies that will help, and I'm going to talk about those for the majority of the talk I'm going to give today. And this won't last forever, and there will be a time when we're on the other side of this, and we'll be able to look back and kind of process it. And at the moment, we're dealing with it so fast, it's a lot to take in. So I'm going to cover just two things. First, how we understand anxiety and stress, and then what strategies help us when we're feeling the ways we might be feeling at the moment. So one of the really key things for us to understand, if we're going to think about this, is the fact that our brain broadly can be divided into three sections. We have the reptilian brain on the left, and then your mammalian brain, which is a bit like a sock going over the top of the first bit. And then the top brain, the human brain. And it's that brain that does planning, organising, thinking things through. That's where our language centres are. But what happens when we're really anxious is that our brain effectively shuts down. And the only bit of our brain we're using is our red bit of our brain, our emergency fight or flight system. And we might be using the middle bit, which is the emotional part of our brain. But we're much less likely to be doing the thinking, the planning, the organising. And I don't know if you've been finding that it's hard to concentrate on anything, it's hard to think things through, it's really difficult to get a hold on anything and you're very distractible. That's because your brain is working in emergency mode at the moment. And a way to understand this is a bit like talking about a smoke alarm. So a smoke alarm is designed to keep us safe from a fire. But in my house, when I put the toast in the toaster, if I burn it, then the smoke alarm goes off. And there's no fire in my house, but my alarm is going off anyway. And I think we're all in a situation where it feels like our alarms are going off, and they're going off a lot. Every time we maybe hear a new bit of news, every time we look at something on the internet, every time we hear something from a friend, or think about something even, our alarm goes off all over again. So we're in this constant state of this beep, beep, beep going off in our brain, and that makes it very difficult to think. When the alarm goes off, the brain shuts down, and we're stuck in a place where we can't think as much as we could normally. And that makes it more difficult then to deal with all the emotions that we're struggling with. So normally what happens when the danger's passed, the smoke clears. But the problem with coronavirus is, one, we can't see it, so we don't know when the danger's there and when it isn't. And also we're getting bombarded by on all media channels, all this information about it. So this constant alarm going off is really quite difficult for us to manage. Now, one of the things we know that happens when our alarm goes off in our brain, when our fight or flight kicks in, that there's quite a lot of physical changes that happen in our body. And you might have noticed some of these if you've ever had a job interview, say, or done something else quite nerve-wracking, maybe before a big game if you're a sports person, something like that, that our heart beats faster, we breathe faster, we maybe feel a bit clammy, or we might feel a bit sick or have butterflies in our stomach. And all of those are normal physical reactions to the anxiety that we're feeling. Our brain releases adrenaline, the adrenaline pumps through us and it does all these different things to our body. What's really tricky in the current situation is that physical things we might be feeling related to what's going on in our body, we might worry are a sign that we're getting ill. And that's a really tricky place to be in, because then how can we tell what's anxiety and what might be just because we're getting ill or we've been exposed to the virus? And that's a problem. And so what we can do about that is, if we can regulate the level of adrenaline that's pumping through us all the time, then we have a chance that we can see for ourselves, actually, this is me being worried and that's why I'm reacting physically. So the rest of the time, I'm just going to talk with you about the things you can do if you're feeling some of these things, angry or upset, anything like that. Now, this is from Action for Happiness, who have a brilliant website, and I would really recommend going on there. What I really like about their work is that it's based on the evidence. So they've looked at lots and lots of studies. And in this situation, these are the 3 things they're reminding you to do. The first one is just to keep calm. Just breathe, focus on what you can do. The second one is to stay wise. And I think this is what the government's been talking to us about, making wise choices that helps everybody, not just you. You might be really keen to go out, for example, but the wise thing to do would be to stay home, maybe to wash your hands if you've been out. That kind of thing is a wise choice that just doesn't just positively impact on you, but it positively impacts on lots of people. And then be kind. And we've already seen a whole load of amazing examples of people doing this kind of thing. And think about what you can do that might be kind too, because the more you can reach out, the more positive impact that has on your own mental health as well. So I think there are 2 ways to see the situation that we find ourselves in. We could think, oh, this situation is so out of control, there's nothing I can do, I can't cope, it's going to have such a negative impact on me, and really having all these thoughts that I'm really, really struggling with. Or we can take those thoughts and just play with them a little bit. And it's really important that you see here that I'm not saying just say everything's fine, just think that it's all going to be okay. That's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you to do is take the thought and see if you can twiddle it so that it's a bit more realistic. So this situation is very difficult. I'll do what I can. Or I can't control many things, but I can look after myself. I can't control the fact that I can't leave my house, maybe, but I can control the fact that I can look after myself while I'm here. I can't cope with this. Actually, I think you probably can cope with this. You might feel like you can't, but you're going to find a way through this. And there's ways to get through this together. And I'm going to give you some examples of how you might feel like, yeah, I can cope with this. I can do that one thing that's going to make a difference. What we know about the way the brain works is the brain focuses on difficult things. Now, this is important. This is a survival mechanism. There's no point looking at all the great things if a terrible thing is happening. You need to be focusing on that in order to survive. If you're out in a country park, say, and you're examining all the beautiful wildlife and a tiger is running towards you, then focusing on the beautiful wildlife isn't going to keep you alive. And the brain has mechanisms to make sure that we focus on the things that might be a threat. So in that situation, our brain is really attuned to noticing movement out of the corner of our eye. We might see that tiger running across and then we can focus on it. But in this situation, focusing on all the difficult stuff that we can't do anything about might be quite difficult because it keeps us stuck. And what we've got to do is find ways to share our attention, even if we can't shift it completely. So here are some of the things that we can do. The first one is that we can acknowledge and name the anxiety or the stress or the anger that we're feeling. That might seem like a really small thing to do, but actually that's absolutely vital. What we know is that when people give a name to the feeling that they're struggling with, it shifts them from their middle brain, that purple bit in the middle brain of the pictures I showed you, into their top brain, their dark blue brain. That's their thinking brain. That's where they can do something about it. So giving your feelings a name switches on your top brain, and then you can think about what you're going to do. So saying, gosh, I'm feeling really anxious since I read that news article, or listening to this press conference is making me really worried or really angry, or whatever the feeling is. Then naming that for yourself is really important. And then in this situation, we have to do two things. We have to accept the things we can't change and change the things we can. There are things we can take control of. And then we have to keep it in perspective. Right now, today, in my house, I am doing okay. I am still here. I am still keeping going. I'm still able to do some of the things I want to do. And then this is a really useful way to think about it. We can manage anxiety by thinking about these traffic lights: stop, think, and do. And here's some examples about what you might do. So stop is what I was just talking about. It's just taking a pause and looking at what you are feeling. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm pretty stressed right now. I'm really scared about what's going to happen. Or my brain's run away with itself and it's really thinking about my parents and whether they're going to be okay. And then you take a deep breath and you try and ground yourself. And then, having done that, we've switched on our top brain. So then we can think, right, there are things that can help. What would be the thing that would help right now? Or I can't do that, but I could do it. I could do this other thing. So I can't speak to that person now because they're busy, but maybe I could do that later on today. But right now, what I can do instead is maybe write them an email. And then there are some things we can do. You can go outside. By this, I mean in the fresh air, maybe in a garden or just outside your front door. You can walk around the house. If you want a physical activity, just walk up and down the stairs 100 times. You can write it down. And I've got a slide on this in a minute, so I'll talk more about that in a sec. Find some things to be grateful for. And really importantly, if you're really struggling with those kinds of thoughts that we've been talking about, do something engrossing. If there a thought like, this is really frightening, what if I catch it? That's a thought you can't do anything about right now, but you could do something to shift the focus of your attention. Clean the oven. I know my oven's needed cleaning for an awfully long time. Maybe now's the time to do it. Read a book, do a craft, sing your favourite song, plan your next project, remember a great holiday, or create an imagined world in your head. Any of those things that are engrossing and fill up your brain are really helpful when there's nothing we can do. That's called shifting the focus of your attention. And that's what this worry tree talks about. I'm not going to talk about this slide for a long time, but as I said, you can pause it if you want to look at it in more detail. Importantly, it's not easy to shift the focus of your attention because your brain is going to want to pay attention to the difficult things like that cartoon showed us. And what I'm saying is, if there's nothing you can do about it, shift the focus of your attention. But it's not easy and it takes practice. It's not something you can just do overnight. You're going to try it today and then say, oh, that was rubbish because it hasn't worked at all. Well, you're right, it might not work the first time, but that's because it's a skill, just like learning to play football, learning to ride a bike, learning to bake a great cake. You can't always do it right first time, and it takes practice. But the more you practice, the more you're training your brain to do something that's helpful. If you can do something about it, do. If you can't, shift the focus of your attention. Here are some things that you could do. If you're finding that you're getting a lot of thoughts or a lot of difficult feelings, you could write about it. We know that writing about things or getting a narrative about it is a really helpful way to process what you're going through. And I think, given that we're living in unprecedented times, we'll want to look back on this and be able to process it once we're through. And if you've kept a journal or a blog or anything like that, a photo diary, that's a way to go, oh yeah, that was the day when that happened, do you remember? So it gives your brain a way to put in order and make sense of what's happening. You also, in this situation, can take control of managing yourself. So you can keep a routine, even if it's different to the routine you had pre-coronavirus. Think about sleep. It's really important. What can happen to us is we can stay up later, wake up later in the mornings, we can get into a different pattern than we might normally. Think about getting a regular pattern of sleep and getting up for things that you need to do, even if it's different from when you were going out. Manage how much social media involvement you have. Do what seems right to keep in touch, but don't get sucked into hype that's making you feel bad. And the same with how much you read. It's really important to keep up to date because having the most recent facts is useful for our brains. Having too much or reading too much into things can just make us more stressed. So notice what are your triggers and think about what you can do about that. Make an effort to keep in touch with people, but also don't make it overwhelming. I think there's been this kind of explosion in virtual contact, and that's amazing because that's a way of supporting people. But think about what feels right for you and get a balance. And I think the next few weeks are going to be a time where we're doing that a lot. And then I've mentioned this a couple of times, but do kind things for others. We do know that doing good things for others has a positive effect on our own well-being, as well as being jolly nice. So there are things you can do from isolation. You can offer support, you can message people, you can put pictures in your windows. Lots of people are doing amazing things. So think about what you could do that's a kind thing for others that is also having a positive impact on your mental health. Counting your blessings. I love this as a strategy. When I've been trying to do this every day, and these are the things I came up with yesterday that I was really grateful for. I'm seeing some amazing things happening despite the difficulties that we're going through. And if all else fails, I find there's always chocolate. And then I think, remember that it's okay to find this difficult. Sometimes you are going to have a big cry about this. Sometimes you're going to feel really cross. Sometimes there are going to be big feelings, and that's okay. Don't beat yourself up for feeling overwhelmed at times. This is a huge situation for any person to process. But also, don't be afraid to laugh. There's some brilliant humour out there, COVID related and non-related. And I think if you need some light relief, find something that tickles you, look it up. And then find joy in little things, like how beautiful the spring is, or when the sun is shining, or a nice jumper that you like the feel of, going to bed early. Just find things that you enjoy. Okay, and then there are some other things that can help you as well. So if you're noticing that you're feeling really panicky, really stressed, then just grounding yourself, feeling the solid floor underneath you, holding on to something and feeling the texture of it, touching your clothes and feeling them. Just get yourself back on the ground. Breathing is a really helpful strategy because, as I said, our bodies start to get really aroused when we're anxious. And sometimes that can trick us into thinking that we're ill, when really it's the anxiety that's making us feel like that. So breathing is a really good way to take back control and to shift back from your red brain back into your thinking brain. And I've put a link there, but there's loads of things out there that you could find that would help with this. And there are some brilliant apps that will help you do exactly these kinds of things that include a help right now button. So have a look for those as well. There's lots of free ones out there. You don't need to pay for one. And I've already said, if you feel helpless, help others. So think about what you could be doing. It doesn't have to be a big gesture. Here are some useful links, and if you're interested in what I've talked about, there is a longer webinar, and the address is at the top there, where you can find more information. It's just a longer version of this one that I've talked about. There will also be one coming about how you talk to children about worry and what they might do, and one for NHS staff. So contact me if you want more information. Thanks very much.